well, 6 or 7 degrees there across East Anglia. So into Saturday then, and some of us will start off rather grey, a bit uninspiring, but like with recent days, that will tend to burn back to many coastal areas, but even here I think we'll see some brightness through the day. And for many places, again, it's a story of sunny spells, temperatures to the high teens, perhaps 20 degrees, and that sets the scene for
Coming up tomorrow at noon.
Welcome to a very special GB News Easter programme. We are invited during this short time to enter into the passion, death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. It's an invitation to take part in the most important part of the Christian life. Happy Easter. Alleluia.
The Meaning of Easter with Calvin Robinson tomorrow at noon on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's 2 questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome along. GB News, live on your telly and on your wireless simultaneously and without breaking a sweat. We can do that. On the Maundy Thursday edition of the Mark Steyn Show, how is God holding up in post-Christian Europe? We'll chew that over with Ava Veladingerbroek. Also, migrants. Great news. You thought you were headed for Folkestone, but we've upgraded you to Kigali. What's up with that? Plus, the one thing we can never get enough of, your questions and comments. Send them along to gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. All that coming up after Polly Middlehurst with the latest news.
Mark, thank you. Our top story tonight, as you've been hearing, the Royal Navy is due to take over responsibility for tackling people smuggling across the English Channel from today. The Prime Minister has also confirmed asylum seekers will be flown to Rwanda for processing as part of a £120 million deal. Boris Johnson says they'll have the capacity to resettle tens of thousands of people over the coming years, and the scheme will serve as a deterrent. He told a news conference the partnership complies with international obligations, but he still expects a legal challenge.
And it's climbing. And unless we can beat the business model of the gangs, I'm afraid it will continue to climb. And what we need to put in place is the deterrent system that will change their minds, make them see that they've made the wrong deal and that there's a better path for them if they really want to come to the UK.
Boris Johnson, well, the Labour leader doesn't agree with that. Sir Keir Starmer described the plan as a desperate effort to distract from the Prime Minister's Partygate fine. Meanwhile, hundreds have gathered outside the Home Office this evening to protest against the government plans. Labour MP Nadia Whittome spoke at the gathering saying, "Shame on Boris Johnson, Priti Patel and every MP who voted for it." An Islamic State so-called beetle has been found guilty of terrorism offences, including lethal hostage-taking and conspiracy to commit murder by an American jury. British national El Shafi El-Sheikh was part of an IS terrorist cell which beheaded American hostages in Iraq and Syria and then released the videos of it. The group nicknamed the Beatles for their British accent. Here, Imran Ahmed Khan says he's going to resign as MP for Wakefield after he was found guilty of sexually assaulting a 15-year-old boy in 2008. He's already been expelled from the Conservative Party. In a Twitter statement put out today, he said he's now going to focus on clearing his name, and he apologised to his family and his community for the humiliation he's brought upon them. International news, and US intelligence believes the Russian warship Moskva is still dealing with an extensive fire on board. Earlier, the Ukrainian military said it had hit the Soviet-era flagship with a missile causing serious damage. Officials said it reportedly had started to sink after ammunition on board the vessel began to explode. The warship is now believed to be heading towards the port of Sevastopol. Moscow is claiming crew members have been evacuated from the ship. And Her Majesty the Queen has expressed her sympathy for the people of South Africa after deadly floods hit the country's east coast. Over 300 people have been killed and hundreds more displaced in what's been described as one of the worst flooding events in South Africa's history. The country's President, Cyril Ramaphosa, pledged to help after visiting families whose homes had been destroyed. In a statement, the Queen said, "I'm deeply saddened to hear of the tragic loss of life and destruction caused by the recent floods in KwaZulu-Natal province. The United Kingdom stands in solidarity with South Africa as you recover from these terrible events." On TV, online and on your radio via DAB+. You're with GB News. Now more from Mark Steyn.
The Queen attended her first Royal Maundy service as Princess Elizabeth, 9 years old, in 1935. Since ascending the throne in 1952, she has missed it just 4 times, twice for childbirth, twice because she was hard at work elsewhere among her realms in the Commonwealth. So there is a poignancy to her absence at the Royal Maundy service today. Earlier, GB News reported that Her Majesty has made the Prince of Wales regent in all but name. I like the word regent, haven't heard it in a couple of centuries since George III lost his marbles and his powers were transferred to the then Prince of Wales. In this case, the Queen still has all her marbles, but she's transferring her powers to a son who's lost his mind on climate change, on the Great Reset, and on a whole bunch of other stuff. So like many of the changes of the last 2 years, it's disquieting, a little unsettling. The ground is shifting under our feet. Still, it's Easter, and Eva Velardingerbroek will be here later to talk about God versus globalism. Here's God and man. Oh yeah, let's have a look at this. That's great. And over on the globalist team, here's the head of the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab, and his twin brother, Ming the Merciless. Yes, who do you put your money on, God or Klaus Schwab? We'll get into all that later on this Maundy Thursday edition of the Mark Steyn Show. But first, illegal migrants on England's southern shore. It's a big issue with Tory voters. In the entire year of 2018, there were 297. The good old days. That's less than 1 per day. In 2019, Boris Johnson became Prime Minister, and the annual total sextupled to 1,823. So eager was the world to partake of Boris's beneficent reign. In 2020, the year's intake shot up again, from 1,823 to 8,438. COVID restrictions on travel for law-abiding persons notwithstanding. In 2021, it rocketed up again to 28,431. Vaccine passports and proof of negative test and all the rest for you if you want to go to France, but not for those coming the other way and using the express check-in on the beaches of England. So far this year, it's running at about double of this time last year. So if that were to stay constant, it'd be about 60,000 people. What's the answer? Rwanda. A name that in word association tests usually invites the response genocide or machetes. In fact, it's now in the British Commonwealth, even though it's never been British. After Belgium's inertia during the massacres of the 90s, Rwanda decided to dump Brussels. It switched from French to English in its education system. It introduced cricket in schools, which is always a good sign, and it applied to join the Commonwealth. And unlike the British bits, from Barbados to the Solomon Islands, it hasn't yet signed up with the Chinese, and so is still pliable by Downing Street and presumably by Priti Patel, who's there right now. So these water taxi priority check-in guys anticipating bluebirds over the white cliffs of Dover will instead be getting bustards over Butari. Maggie Mutesi is one of the most respected of Rwandan broadcasters. You may have seen her show on BBC Africa or on Rwandan television, and we're delighted to see her. Maggie, we've talked about this thing all day on in the British media, basically from the British end of things. I'm really curious as to what Rwandans make of this, and do they support the Rwandan government going along with this?
Thanks a lot for having me, Steve. And I think in the introduction, I had you say we didn't fully become British. I have to say we're Rwandan. Even though we joined the Commonwealth, we will definitely never become British, and we will never be French. We will never be anything beyond being Rwandans. I just wanted to make that clear.
No, good for
going
you.
Back to, I know, going back to this issue, I think, as Rwandans, you know, and I speak on behalf of myself as a journalist. I've been covering Rwanda for quite some time, but I'm a refugee as well. So we have a history that has actually got us to live and be even born in different parts of the world or parts of the country. Myself, I never lived in Rwanda for the first 10 years of my life because of our history. So it's not new to me to be an immigrant. It's not new to me to be a refugee. So if there is a chance to give a helping hand, this is where we've been, and this is where, for me, I think the big question should be, where are the big boys when small countries like Rwanda that have less than 14 million people are able to step up? So it's not new to Rwanda as a country, but also as to Rwandans. We've been all over the world because of what we've been through. So this is a way of being part of a solution, a global migration crisis that the rest of the world loves sometimes to pinpoint where they can't come on board and give help where they can.
Well, I take your point. There's certainly been a lot of migration within Africa because of things like the Congolese civil war and, just in West Africa, I mean, it's like a continuous rotation of populations from one West African nation to another because of one thing or another. But in this case, you would be the British plan is to send only unaccompanied single males. The largest source of these single males right now is Iranian, but they're also Syrian men. Is there, bearing in mind the difficulties between, Tutu and Hutsi and Tutu, is there a high degree of tolerance for men who come from entirely different cultures in Rwanda right now?
I think this is really a shock for me to hear the question, Steve. It's not about whether they're male or they are certain gender. It's about giving a hand to a crisis that is actually become a global crisis. And for me, at the end of the day, when I look at it in the global spectrum, it's not about, whatever Rwanda is or it being a certain gender, that male that is being accepted. It's about stepping in to come and give support where you can. And I don't know if I find your question lazy, because I don't know how to really go about it. But at the end of the day, it's about giving help. And I think, let me just ask you this question, Steve. Maybe you would just help me understand. In the context of Rwanda, because if you want to look at it as a small country, it's a country that is, like I've been seeing on social media since morning, less developed, like a lot of people have come out to say. And I kept on saying to my friends, has any of these people actually stepped in Rwanda? Do they even know the progress the country has actually made in the past couple of years? My question would be, we've seen lots of Western countries, in the West, just keeping quiet to this crisis, to this migration crisis for the past years. Of course, we've seen countries like Rwanda step up, countries like Uganda just the other day that took in Syrians, and now Rwanda is taking in others. Where is other countries like Spain? Obviously, we know Germany took in a few over 1 million Syrians the other day, but where are other countries? Where are the big boys? I mean, when countries like Rwanda that are considered less developed or considered every other, word that the world wants to use, they're here offering a solution. They're here saying, we will take them in. Where is the rest of the world that has the power to scream when small countries step up to actually provide a solution? For me, I think we have to look at it in that perspective. It's not about the dynamics in the country or, how much the country has. It's a humanitarian crisis at the end of the day. It's a humanitarian crisis that when it happens, the small countries that step up are bashed even for the little that they have done. It's not about, the culture. It's not about whatever it is in Rwanda that you might want to know. And I just find it unbelievably ignorant when I see some comments about, why countries like Rwanda are stepping up, or, why refugees are, are being brought to Africa. It just feels like I still think Africa was living in 1998 or something like that.
No, I can understand that. People have been certainly in the London media, people have been extremely rude about Rwanda today, and there have been left-wing lawyers saying they're going to take this to court because Rwanda has a terrible human rights record and they don't want to be sending people to Rwanda. But I was talking to a friend, an East African friend in Kenya, and this point was made to me, which is really what I was getting at, is that during the genocide, a lot of young men died during the Rwandan genocide. So that Rwanda actually, it was put to me, has a need for young men because it has a slightly distorted demographic profile arising from the fact that so many young guys were slaughtered in the 1990s. So I wondered whether it was actually seen in Rwanda as a solution to the sex-distorted demographic cohort that arose from all the killing 30 years ago.
I think it's really quite disgraceful to look at it in that way, and especially coming from a Kenyan, because, and just to also say this is a month where we actually in Rwanda commemorate the genocide against the Tutsi, and, you know, rest in peace to those that lost their lives. But at the end of the day, it has nothing to do with that. Rwanda as a country has made so much progress in the past years. We're speaking of a country that has grown at 6% for the past 10 years, that has actually spearheaded East Africa's economic integration and the continent's economic integration, that up until now has a vibrant islands industry that I could name a lot of things, infrastructure, a lot of things that I could put out there, but that's not the case. I think for me, it brings us to a simple question like, is Rwanda one of the richest countries in the world? No. Is it one of the richest countries in East Africa? No. Is it one of the richest even in Africa or regionally, absolutely no. But they have something little to offer to the world, and that is a home for people actually to say. For me, I would ask why the person who made that comment, why isn't, for example, a big powerhouse like South Africa taking in the refugees? Why isn't, for example, big countries with big GDPs taking, Angola or even Kenya, name it? Because all these are richer countries. Why are they not taking in the refugees? I think it's that human, simple answer that we just have to look at the end of the day is that the small country with absolutely not as much, like the world puts it, has got a big heart, or at the end of the day, they have something, they're giving something beyond just talk that the rest of the world has done for a very long time with this global crisis. That instead walking the talk, bring the refugees in. It's not the first time. Rwanda has taken on several asylum seekers, even 2 years ago or a year ago. I mean, it's not the first time we're seeing this, even within East Africa. So I think it's really absurd or disgraceful to relate this, especially to what has happened to Rwanda's history, because it's absolutely much as we've been refugees ourselves. I think at the end of the day is what good can you do in the world?
Well, that's a very optimistic and appealing way of putting it, Maggie, and I thank you for that, because basically a lot of the commentary in the London...
I have to say this because it saddens me when I go, and now forget about everything, it saddens me when I go on social media to read all these comments from the British public about, it feels like they're sending people to the bush, to the forest. Absolutely no. Rwandans are not starving, Africans are not walking naked. We are happy to receive them. We are happy to, to have them in our countries. We're happy to give a hand where we can. We've been in situations like this for many years.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because what's interesting is that there seems to be a lot of what you might call neo-colonialist assumptions in that, to go back to your point about why isn't South Africa taking anybody, why isn't Nigeria, and the assumption here, particularly by the human rights lawyers, is that Rwanda was just leaned on by London. But as you've said, you're giving of yourselves generously to these people, and we shall see how this plan works out. This story is just beginning, and we're going to see how it works out. Thank you very much, Maggie Mutesi. You can see her on television. She's one of Africa's... Thank you, Maggie. One of Africa's most respected broadcasters. Had a great show on BBC Africa. We appreciate Maggie's insight into this. It's very different, the Rwandan angle. Let me know what you think. GBViews at gbnews.uk. You can Twitter me at GBNews. Your thoughts coming next. Plus lots of other stuff from Sligo to Scandinavia. All coming up on The Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Let's get to your comments. Carol says about Rwanda, it's a great deterrent. Nothing else is working, so a big yes from me. Definitely worth a try. I don't care about costs. We're already spending a fortune of them. If it stops them coming here, that's a result. Yeah, we put them up in 4-star hotels in southern England, and my understanding is that generally speaking, a 4-star hotel in Kigali is rather cheaper. By the way, here's the genius bit of this plan, which is why I was interested in Maggie's take. You'll do the processing. Instead of doing the processing in England, you'll be processed in Rwanda. And if your application for asylum status is approved, you'll get to live in Rwanda. Which is genius. You say set off from the Gambia, we're in a little boat all the way across to Italy, then you make your way through continental Europe, then you get in another little boat and you get all the way to Dover, and then 3 months later your application is approved to live in Rwanda. Genius. We'll see whether it stands legal scrutiny. Stuart says, I doubt it's the cheapest option. Show me it in action, and none of it is the cheapest option. You know, when you look around you. How much of what you see are you paying for? Do you really want to be paying for guys to be put up in 4-star hotels and ordering room service for the rest of their lives? This probably is. It's certainly not going to be any more expensive. Lewis says, anything to stop this mass invasion. Go for it. Guns blazing. No, we don't do the guns blazing thing anymore. It's all done, you know. Your application is now made in Rwanda and you get approved to live in Rwanda. Rwanda is a full member of the Commonwealth and the United Kingdom is a full member of the Commonwealth. Alison says, the accommodation is far better than that which the EU offers. We can't support the hotel bills, healthcare and food. Yeah, well, I don't know what the hotels are like in Kigali, but I should imagine it's better than living under a bridge in Calais. Okay, a couple of days ago, we mentioned the totally dishonest media framing of the murder of Sir David Amess in Southend, where we were told that it was all something to do with the hateful public discourse on social media and how it just showed we needed more regulations and restraints on free speech to make us all polite so that people don't go and take a machete to members of Parliament. Well, as goes Southend, so goes Sligo. A man has been killing gay men in Sligo. Well, of course, these Irishmen are totally homophobic, aren't they? And let's see, I'm just looking at who the Irish media have blamed things on in the last couple of days. Oh, the Catholic Church, of course, sex education in Catholic schools, single-sex schools. I see one commentator says the problem, the reason we're getting all these gay corpses in Sligo is because we're not teaching primary school children about transitioning and changing their gender at the 4- and 5-year-old. So who is this Irishman who's killing all the gay guys? Well, his name is Yousef Palani. And it doesn't get any more Irish than that. It's an old Sligo name. Joining us to discuss this is the filmmaker and best-selling author, Anne McElhenney. Anne, I've got a high degree of tolerance for totally dishonest media coverage, but I must say the coverage of this Sligo case has actually tested it somewhat.
Yeah, I mean, I know that you have a little bit of Irish in you, Mark, and I think you probably know, maybe a lot of your audience don't know, that when you hear about a murder in Ireland, you know, if you heard about somebody being glassed to death, that's one of the things that our country is famous for, or car bombing.
Yep.
We also, I think, perhaps invented the car bomb. However, when you hear that someone has been beheaded or has been mutilated in a very extraordinary way, as these two men, God help them, have found this awful fate, you should be asking questions, because it's very interesting. I don't know if you heard that Helen McAtee, one of the Irish politicians in Parliament in Ireland, said, immediately said, by the way, talk about a rush to judgment. She immediately said, I thought that these are incidents that we thought were behind us. And I have to say, Mark, now you're maybe a little older than me, but I don't remember too many beheadings in Ireland now. It's not something we're famous for. As I said, glassing people and car bombs. And surely you would think that once people understood, first of all, this is very, very, extraordinarily unusual. This is a serial killer in a sense. Highly unusual. Where's the skepticism? But I'll tell you what there's no shortage of, is a rush to judgment, exactly like the pieces that you've just quoted. We're not doing enough in primary schools. You know, this is where they're going, that these are incidents that we thought were behind us. No, there's something else that's happened in Ireland recently. And it's not any shortage of diversity officers that we have. But something has happened. And by the way, you, Mark, wrote the book on this. Well, how long ago? Is it a decade ago now? You wrote the book on this.
Yeah,
we've had a large population increase in Ireland of people from other countries. And one of the great things about people coming from other countries is food. And we love the food, we love the clothes, we love the colour diversity. There's a problem, however, if people come from another country who think that it's okay to throw a homosexual person off a roof. And some people coming to Ireland think that. And maybe instead of rushing to have a conversation about hate in Ireland, we should rush to have a conversation about immigration.
Yep. That would actually seem to be the one word that none of these various Irish politicians and media figures have mentioned. We've seen this before, quite a few, you know, the Big Pulse nightclub massacre in Florida, where everybody says to me, oh, this is right-wing homophobia. And then it turned out to be an Afghan whose father had been photographed standing next to Hillary Clinton. So it's a quite ridiculous thing. Now, when you put it in the context of Irish history, and you're right, you know, I take my life in my hand if I go into a pub in Dundalk and start singing God Save the Queen. I'll stand well back and expect a good glassing if I don't get out of there in a hurry. But doesn't that actually make the point? When you look at it in the scheme of things, you know this as well as anyone. In the scheme of things, there aren't really a lot of differences between Irish Catholics and Irish Protestants, but it's a big bedeviling issue. There aren't really a lot of differences between the Irish and the English, but it's been 3/4 of a millennium of a fractious relationship that's turned tragic at times. Why would anybody in Ireland, of all places, think that you can just bring people from a wholly different culture, drop them on the Emerald Isle, and there's no consequences to that?
You know, and on top of that, Ireland is actually, you know, incredibly proud of how progressive it has become. And I use the air quotes there advisedly, Mark. As you probably know very well, in 2015, Ireland became the first country on the planet Earth to have a referendum in favour of gay marriage. So, you know, and by the way, it was an overwhelming majority of the people who voted for that, 62%, I think, who voted in favour of gay marriage. That's where Ireland is. But what happens when you bring people from, forget about the third world, forget about that. What about bringing people from the Stone Age? What happens when you bring people from the Stone Age to live in this progressive place? Will there be problems with that? Well, there might be. And I'm not even saying maybe there are, but I will say maybe it's something we should talk about. We should talk about maybe, is there an issue with bringing people from fundamentalist Muslim environments, fundamentalist Muslim populations, who think some extraordinary things that we don't think? in our progressive Ireland? And do we think it might cause us a problem? These people who think, for example, that women should, like literally women should never leave the home, that women should be covered up all the time, that, as I said, gay people can be, with impunity, can be thrown off the top of buildings, that young girls who decide to think for themselves can have their own family kill them in what's called an honour killing. Should we maybe have a good big conversation about that? But of course, what's happening in Ireland right now, the conversation is about hate crimes. And as you say, all of the attention is on horrible Catholic Ireland. Awful, awful Catholic Ireland. Well, they had their eyes on the wrong target. Catholic Ireland has nothing to do with what happened to these two very unfortunate men. And by all accounts, these two really gentle souls who have met the most awful, awful fate, the most awful, awful end to their lives because of policies brought in by Irish goody-goodies, Irish progressives who think diversity is lovely. And I love the diversity of the food, but I'm not sure about the diversity of the culture. You know, where I know in Dublin, in parts of Dublin, I know very well in parts of Dublin where there are very heavily Muslim communities, where women are not comfortable wearing the clothes they'd like to wear in those neighbourhoods. So do we want that? Do we want more of that? Do we want to stop for a minute and say, let's consider this? Because these people that we're meant to be super respecting, because they come from a different culture and all culture must be respected. I think you and I don't, I think there's no air between you and I, Mark, on this, that there are cultures that I don't respect. I don't respect places where they mutilate women, they genitally, I don't respect that at all. I don't respect it at all that you throw a gay man off a building. I don't respect that at all. I would like to think in a civilized world, we'd all agree on that and say, do you know what, maybe in this case, diversity isn't a great idea in the population. We'll take the food, we'll take the nice clothes, but we're not going to take your values that say women should stay in the home and that gay men are an abomination.
Well, these two men in Sligo, as you say, an absolutely terrible end. And what I find, as with Sir David Amos in Southend, within minutes of the body being discovered, there's a heartlessness in the general public, because they will not confront, you know, being beheaded in Sligo or having over 20 stab wounds in a church in Southend. They will not confront the reality of this. The instinct of the general population is to brush it under the carpet and say, oh, this just goes to show we need more regulation on social media, or we need a new hate crimes bill. When could the conversation we've just had take place on RTE or in the Irish Times?
Oh, good luck with that, Mark. I mean, you know, good luck with any chance that that's going to happen. As you say, it's a massive rush to always go after the Catholic Church, which, by the way, I'm all about going after the Catholic Church for horrific and horrendous things that they did in the past. This has absolutely nothing to do with the Catholic Church. Pardon?
Thank you. No, I've heard you extemporizing on the Catholic Church, and it's a performance well worth seeing. Thank you very much, Anne McElhenney. It's a terrible story, that, and we're going to cover them just honestly, just because nobody else covers these stories honestly. The deputy chairman of Russia's Security Council has threatened there's going to be no more talk of a nuclear-free Baltic, because Finland and Sweden are suddenly banding together to be the backbone of a new Nordic NATO. The strange part, though, as the Lithuanian defense minister has explained, is that Russia already has nuclear weapons in the Baltic, in Kaliningrad. That's the little bit. Can we put a map up of Kaliningrad? It's an odd bit of Russia that isn't connected to Russia. To put it in Anne McElhenney terms, it's a bit like Northern Ireland there, because it's a long way from the mainland, as they probably say in Kaliningrad. Anyway, joining me now is Lieutenant General Jonathan Riley, who is an old NATO hand from Afghanistan and elsewhere. Russia seems to regard this putative expansion of NATO as the latest provocation. How do you see it?
Hello, Mark. It's very nice to be with you again. Well, That's one way of looking at it, isn't it? Another is, well done, Putin, for having pushed two nations with such a diverse history and relationship with Russia into the arms of your enemies, but by your behaviour. Finland has had a very complex relationship with Russia. It's been ruled by Russia. It's fought against Russia. It's been neutral, but under the Russian influence. Sweden has famously been neutral really since the first part of the 19th century. But both of them have guarded their independence and they've maintained their own ways. But such is the behavior of Russia that they now feel that the only way to safeguard their security is to line up with the West and to look to NATO. So well done, Putin, for engineering the thing that you said you wanted to avoid.
I could see that from their point of view. I'm wondering if there's a danger in NATO just becoming a general Western club, as opposed to a more specific and purposeful alliance of military powers. Do you worry about that?
I don't worry about it. No, NATO has been the guardian and the security of the civilized world since the end of the Second World War, and it has in recent years undertaken operations outside Western Europe, as you know, to try to safeguard and push forward civilized values. And who knows that there may be other candidates lining up for membership of NATO. What about Moldova? What about Georgia? What about Armenia? They must be feeling pretty threatened right now. They're not exactly Western European nations, but they're nations that share the general values that we have.
It would be a big thing if Armenia were to join. You know, I find this slightly odd because I've mentioned this on the show before. About 20 years ago, I found myself sitting at lunch next to Lord Carrington, and he drawled at me in that wonderful drawl of his at one point over the soup, "What is NATO for?" And I said to him, well, you know, you were Secretary General. If you don't know, why should I know? What is NATO for if Armenia is a prospective candidate?
It's for the security of the values of freedom and democracy, for security, to prevent and to prevent aggression through the medium of illegal war, which is what is being prosecuted in Ukraine at the moment. That's what it's for.
And you're confident that that principle can be extended eastward, not just to Sweden and Finland, the Baltics are already in, but it can go to Moldova and Armenia as well?
Well, if it can go to Finland and Sweden, and it's already in Turkey, don't forget, which is pretty far east.
Oh, yes.
Then in theory and in principle, it could go. It could go anywhere. Why not? The issue is, will the guarantees of under Article 5 be credible? The guarantees under Article 5, which is an attack on one is attack on all, will be credible only if NATO can project the sort of military power that is going to be needed to stop Russia. Now, military power in a confrontation is not it's not an absolute thing. It's a relative thing. Its capabilities relative to the enemy, and we're seeing this in Ukraine. The Russians are not doing very well on the battlefield, and they're not doing very well because they're faced with the Ukrainian army that's very numerous. It's been equipped by the West. It's been trained by the US and Britain, and it's more than holding its own. So long as the other militaries in NATO do understand that, and they don't think just because the Russians are not doing very well, we can step back and not do much. So long as we all step up to the plate, we equip and arm and train our militaries to face the Russians, then we don't have anything to fear.
Well, just let me ask you a final question on that, because you raised Article 5. Nigel Farage was talking to a United States senator who said, you know, no guy in Cleveland wants to go to war for Estonia. Do you think an Enniskillen Fusilier or whatever wants to go to war for Armenia or even Finland?
Well, nobody wants to go to war for anything at all. But how would the guy in Cleveland feel if somebody in Britain or Washington DC said, "Don't really feel like going to war for you"? Article 5 is a catch-all. It catches all of us, whether we like it or not. And it's not about what we think; it's about what the other side does.
Yeah, it's there's a lot of deterrence in the air at the moment. Thank you very much for that, Jonathan. We always appreciate your insights on these things. Coming up, you can ask me anything in Stump the Steyn, GB Views at GB News. Also, Eva Vladingerbrook on what it's going to take to see off globalism. Don't touch that dial. We're coming right back.
Coming up on Dan Wootton tonight, I'll meet the brave women behind Respect My Sex If You Want My Ex, the most important feminist movement since the suffragettes. Caroline Fisk, Heather Binning and Helen Joyce weigh in on the gender madness gripping society and that summit of cancelled women with J.K. Rowling. Plus, social media activist Zubi, political firebrand Anne Widdecombe and Mark Dolan sound off on the issues that matter to you. And I'll break down the headlines of the day with my superstar panel, the Conservative commentator Dominique Samuels, former Tory London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey, and Sunday Mirror political editor Nigel Nelson. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
A week or two back, there was a big national conservatism conference in Brussels, and one speech in particular tickled my fancy.
In that speech, I spoke openly about God, stating that our God-given rights, like bodily integrity, were heavily being violated by the vaccine mandates. After the conference later that day, we, Joram and I, had a discussion with some of our Swedish conservative friends, and they told me that talking about God in Sweden or in any other Northwestern European country would make you lose about 90% of your audience and should be avoided at all costs.
That was Dutch lawyer Eva Vlaardingerbroek, and we're now going to test that Swedish alleged conservative nostrum and kiss off 90% of the audience by talking about God in the rubble of what we used to call Christendom. Great to see you, Eva. Just let me know how, first of all, how did that speech go down in Brussels?
Hi, Mark. Good to see you. Well, actually, surprisingly well. I didn't lose 90% of my audience there. So I think we proved it right then and there that it was a false statement. But let's see how it goes with your ratings right now.
Well, you made the point, because you basically posited it as God versus globalism, and you see globalism as a kind of religion for so-called progressives. Because, the transcendent meaning of life used to be God and heaven, and now for these guys, it's that you're saving the planet because of climate change, so the Maldives won't be over flooded with water in the next century or whatever. In other words, globalist policies give meaning to lives on the left.
Right, exactly. They give meaning to life on the left, and not just do they give meaning, and so do they sort of do they form like basically a sort of a way of going around the fact that we don't live in a world anymore where morality, where Christianity rules, or where it's clear for people what is right and what's wrong. Actually, the left has completely destroyed that with all of these moral vagueness, all this idea that everything is subjective. The left has said, global ideas say, everything in life is a social construct. Gender is a social construct, for example, right? But what I said in that speech is that now, not only do they say, oh, life or gender, things in life that we find normal are only social constructs and can be changed to our will. No, life itself is also a social construct. And that's what I see as one of the largest dangers now of the globalist agenda, and that is, in the end, is transhumanism.
Yeah, that's well, we're already seeing there the suggestion that they can put a chip in you that enables you to buy a coffee at Starbucks or whatever. It seems like an odd road to be going down. It seems like the first step to transhumanism in a way. But what I think is true is that on the right there is also a hostility to God, because conservatives of one kind or another think that ship has sailed, God is over, and we can't do anything by fighting on that turf. But you actually, I thought, made a very sharp point against that.
Right. No, they say, like my Swedish conservative friends, for example, who say, especially when it comes to the youth, we can't speak about Christianity, that will scare them off. They'll say that's scary, that's a fairy tale book, something that we can't believe in. But I think that it's the opposite. So what the conservatives have a tendency to do is focus on national policy. But focusing on national policy, for example, when it comes to, the COVID mandates, chips in your hands, all these things, they're all pretty convenient, right? You could argue on national level that that's good for citizens. But what you have to do is take it to a way higher level and say, no, actually, we don't need something that's smaller than globalism. We need something that is greater. We need something that presents us with a clear message of the truth, of good moral values, that I think is something that young people who nowadays don't really have any idea of what Christianity is about, what God is about, what the church is about. They are more of a blank slate to that, so to say, than, for example, the generation of my parents who rebelled against their parents and who rebelled against, who are all in this sort of spirit of the soixante-huitard, So I think that young people are way more open to the idea of Christianity, actually, than we might think.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, because as you say, your parents' generation, they knew what they were rebelling against, whereas younger people throughout the West there's a kind of blank. There's just a big blank slate, a hole where that should be. You used a phrase, they want to turn us into docile consumers. And I think you were talking about these globalist types. That's all they see us as. But are you worried that the right accepts that framing of the issue so that, for example, the right just wants to find a different kind of docile consumerism for people to partake?
Oh, absolutely. No, there's this very dangerous sort of monstrous alliance, you could say, between the economic right, so the neoliberal right, and the left, where they both in some way have embraced this idea of globalism from different standpoints. So let's say the left wants a globalized world where there's one people, there are no borders, everyone's equal, it's amazing with fairy tales and rainbows everywhere, and we all hold hands, right? I'm exaggerating, but that is basically what the left says that they stand for. All right, well, then you have the economic right wing, the people who rule my country, for example, Mark Rutte, they say that they're a right wing, even liberal conservative party. Well, the only thing these people seem to be thinking about is free market, and free market, which actually only benefits the big capital, the same big capital that adopts the woke agenda that you see, that is so prevalent with all of these companies that are going. That are now holding up, of course, the Ukrainian flag, but before that it was maybe the LGBT flag, and before that it was something else. It's always the next best thing.
Yep, no, that's true. The number of people who just get out the Ukrainian flag avatar for their Twitter feeds. You used a marvelous phrase right at the beginning of your speech. You said the good, the true, and the beautiful. And I listen to people from all over the world telling us what we need, but I think that is actually a great platform for the way forward. The good, the true, and the beautiful, because that's the side most of us should want to be on.
Absolutely, yes. And those things, what I said in the speech as well, is what sets us apart, I think, as conservatives, apart from our national differences, our national interests, is that those are maybe the three exactly, again, transcendentals that we should aim for, because those things aren't subjective. Those are objective. There is a truth. Something has a truth. There is beauty. There is good. So those, I think, are the things that we should tell young people, that not everything is vague, not everything is subjective, not everything is a social construct. No, there are truths in this world that you can live by and that can make your life and the lives of many other people much better. And I think it's actually the only way that we have to fight and to really be able to fight the great evils that we're fighting today, the great evils of globalism.
Well, thank you very much for that, Eva. And I do hope people will check out your full speech in Brussels. It's out there on the internet. The good, the true, and the beautiful. Words to live by. Let's go stumping before they turf us out of here. Alan says, would Keir Starmer come up with a better plan to deal with migrants? Obviously not. He'd like to win those red wall seats back, but he knows this is an issue with great salience in the red wall, so he's just, driveling his usual mush at the moment. But the energy in his party is open borders. Open borders. They don't think there's... Boris has come up with a great wheeze because he's saying, oh yeah, we're all in favour of you getting refugee status in Rwanda, 4,000 miles down the road. And he's daring the Labour Party, in fact, to say, why would you want anyone to have to go to Rwanda? John asks, where does a destitute refugee lay his hands on 10 grand for a seat on a dinghy? I'm just asking on behalf of TripAdvisor. This is the only thing holding up the tourist industry now, because it's very difficult to fly to your vacation flat in Mykonos or Mallorca or wherever. So in fact, people paying human smugglers, sex traffickers, and all the rest is about the only part of the tourist industry that it's still profitable. Chris says, what about all the money we're giving the French government? Do we get that back? I don't think so, because they're very unhappy with Rwanda switching from being part of the Francophone world to joining the Commonwealth. That'll do it. Dan Wootton's about to thump your Thursday like an Easter bunny off his face on chocolate cream eggs. Have a wonderful Easter. Stay safe, stay free.
Hello there, I'm Stephen Keats and I've got your latest Met Office forecast for you. For tonight then, it's a mostly dry picture across the UK. The mist and murk will return for some of us, particularly around some coasts in the southwest. It's a bit damp towards northwest Scotland because we've got a weak weather front just fringing with parts of western Scotland, the Western Isles, and maybe the far west of Northern Ireland. Later in the night though, it will also be pushing back into parts of southwest Wales, maybe Devon and Cornwall. So a bit damp here later in the night. For many places though, it's dry, variable amounts of cloud, a bit misty in places, and not particularly cold. Temperatures in towns and cities 7 to 10. Now into Good Friday then, we've got this front hanging in the wings out towards the west. Further to the east though, we're still under the influence of this area of high pressure.